and the South Cambridgeshire local plan. Can everyone hear me? My name is Antony and I have been appointed by the Secretary of State along with Ms Graham to carry out the examinations into the two local plans. Gloria Alexander is the Programme Officer and the contact details on the back of the guidance notes. As you're probably aware, a request has been made today to film the proceedings from the Federation of the Cambs Residents Association. As the owner of the property, South Cambridgeshire Council has not raised any objections in principle to this. However, the conduct of the examinations is a matter for the examining inspectors and therefore filming is at their discretion. Does anyone have any objection to the filming and recording of the proceedings? Thank you. Okay, please remember that as participants and observers at the hearing sessions may change on a daily basis, it will be necessary to go through this process each day. I understand you were filming the rest of the week. Please note also that permission is given only to film and record the hearing whilst in session. All filming and recording equipment should be switched off during adjournments, as participants may wish to have private conversations with their colleagues. If I consider at any time that the filming and recording is distracting, disruptive or inhibiting participation in the discussion, I shall require it to cease. Okay, can I ask the Council for the evacuation procedure? Should we need to leave the building? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr Wood. We're not expecting any test drills today, therefore if the alarm sounds, leave by the doors, downstairs at the back of the building and gather at the far side of the car park until we're advised how to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. There is an attendance list circulating. Could everybody please sign the attendance list before you leave today? Thank you. If you have a mobile phone, could you switch it either onto silent mode or switch it off for the purposes of the hearing? Does everyone have access to the matters and issues agenda? I've got a copy of that. In accordance with the published hearing programme, and today we will consider the issue related to the reconvening matter 7. I will aim to have a short break mid-morning and mid-afternoon, and we will break for lunch at about 1 p.m. I will now ask those who are participating in the proceedings to briefly introduce themselves. Start on Mr. Gallagher.
So, my name is Greg Callaghan. I'm here representing North Barton Road Landowners Group.
Good morning, I'm Tony Hawkins, and I'm here representing the Coalition of Parish Councils as a last night standing for St John's.
David Bell, Brian G. Hall on behalf of CUG, and Nick Baker on behalf of Lichfield and on behalf of CUG also.
Peter Baker, Community Council for CUG.
Good morning, my name is Leonard Martin. I'm representing myself.
David Brimmer from WSP, representing Martinborough Homes and Harcourt Developments.
Chris James, WSP, representing RW Estates and BIF.
Lou Mason-Walsh, Transport Modelling Manager, Cambridge County Council.
John Dixon, Principal Planning Policy Officer, South Cambridgeshire Council.
Caroline Hunt, Planning Policy Manager, South Cambridgeshire District Council, and we also have with us today Stephen Miles from the Cambridge City Council and Jeremy Smith from the County Council to come to the table as necessary during the discussion.
Well, so that's the TUC Council for South Cambridgeshire District Council.
Okay, thank you. Before we move to the matters and issues, questions, the two issues that I just wanted to raise. Firstly, with Mr. Marty, you have submitted to us a document that you've asked for us to consider as part of the hearing. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah. Can I ask, I'm sure the Council's obviously seen that, can I ask if the Council has any objections?
No, sir.
You've no objections to receiving the document?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Also, I understand that there's been a move to try and establish a statement of common ground. I think that's being led by CUG. Could you give us an update on that, please?
So yes, I think this might take probably about 10 minutes. I just want to, if there's any objections to getting in. I think I also just perhaps give a little bit of background, just so you have some measure of the importance of this point and how profoundly disturbed CEG is by the way the councils have behaved here. As you know, the matter was last considered, transport was last considered 2.5 years ago, and it's important to recall, revisit what happened then, especially since in the context of considering whether the evidence base has been soundly prepared. It was agreed that the statement of common ground be prepared by the parties, and to that end, effectively, a working group was set up to agree a statement of common ground. Following the hearing in February 2015, the inspectors, asked for a statement of common ground to be submitted in March. March 2015 came and went. The councils said they needed more time and were unable to submit anything which would lead to a statement of common ground, but they said that they would produce small modelling work which would form the basis for the statement of common ground to be produced. Can I just ask you to read a letter of the 12th of March 2015? I'm not going to take it out and read it now, but it was from NLP to you, Sir, and Miss Graham, and it indicated why we thought that it was important that there be some openness and transparency in the provision of information. And it set out a list of issues upon which we sought further clarification and explanation. There was then a meeting on the 16th of April between all the participants in relation to the statement of common ground. It's unclear whether the notes of that meeting are an inquiry document, but I think they undoubtedly should be, because the meeting was very useful and identified a number of action points which it was agreed the county council would attend to, the councils would attend to. On the 20th of May, you, the inspectors, issued your letter which led to the suspension of the examination. And on the 10th of June, the councils requested a postponement of the provision of the transport statement of common ground, and that request was granted. On the 9th of July, the council wrote to us to say they would be undertaking further transport modelling to address the inspectors' concerns. And on the 16th of July, and this is very important, so we've got an email to this effect which I'd like to have circulated. Mr. Bell, so an email of the 16th of July 2015. Mr. Bell, who's sitting next to me, wrote to the councils, and I think it was copied to the Premier Officer, welcoming the council's decision to undertake further transport modelling as part of the fresh assessment of options. On the basis of this further modelling work is to be carried out, and there's now a good opportunity for the councils and participants to agree the input parameters for this future modelling work and thereby support a robust appraisal of alternatives and in due course assist the examination process. And it goes on to say that there's important merits to having a further technical meeting with the relevant council officers and consultants before the work begins. as this would assist in striking a balance between moving forward quickly and efficiently and ensuring that the work is robust and fit for purpose. I'm not going to read the whole of that letter out, I will ask you to read it in its entirety. There was no response to it. The next important date is, as you know, the Council has produced a new transport evidence document published, which is RDMC 070, and an updated supplementary technical note, which is RDMC 071. The consultation on that material took place at the end of 2015 and early 2016. There is a further important email from the councils in relation to Statement of Common Ground dated the 14th of December from Sarah Saunders of Cambridge City Council. That's in the one that you've got. As you'll be aware, in response to the inspector's letter of the 20th of May, the council has undertaken further work and currently consulting on proposed modifications to the local plans, and then she identifies what the further work is. Paragraph 2.42 of this report refers to the Statement of Common Ground for Transport Modelling and explains that whilst much of the further information that's provided as part of the process to date has been incorporated into the main narrative of the report, a separate appendix will be produced for information. The following supplementary technical notes have been published and are available using the following link. The councils remain committed to progressing the Statement of Common Ground and will be seeking advice from the inspector via the programme officer as to the most appropriate time to take the Statement of Common Ground forward. Will therefore be in contact in due course. CG made its responses in January 2016, as did other participants in relation to the issue of highways. That was in January 2016, and then nothing until the 3rd of March 2017, when it appears that a note was, an email was sent, with a note attached to it, to the inspectors. It wasn't copied to any of the other participants in the inquiry. It was, in fact, a private note, and it addressed, effectively stated the council's position and asserted that there was very limited common ground between the councils and the participants. Can I just draw your attention to that email, please, sir? I think it forms part of, the email was sent by a Stephen Miles, and it's dated the 3rd of March 2017. I'm not going to read the note out in its entirety, but the key points are to be found on the 3rd page of the note. And it says it's become clear to the councils from the meeting with participants on the 16th of April 2015 and the results of public consultation on proposed modifications in December 2015, January 2016 are set out in the report on consultation that there is very limited common ground between the councils and participants on the technical transport modelling for the purposes of preparing an SCG. The councils note that the majority of the representations to the transport modelling are made either by those objecting to major new developments, specifically the new settlements, or by those promoting major new developments not included in the plan, including the Greenbelt emission site. Transport matters which participants' appearance in relation to new settlements and emission sites may be expected to advance will be considered at the forthcoming hearing, beginning at the end of March and thereafter. The councils wish to assist the inspectors to move forward with the examination in the most helpful way, mindful also of not undertaking work that is likely to achieve little in assisting the inspectors or providing unnecessary further documents to the examination. As such, please can the inspectors advise whether, in light of the further information made available to them since the Matter 7 hearing, including the results of consultation, they now consider an SCG to be necessary. If they conclude an SCG remains necessary, please can they clarify what form the SCG should be prepared to best assist them, bearing in mind that's not anticipated to be much common ground identified, and advise what an SCG that's anticipated to be almost entirely uncommon ground would most helpfully include and how it should be structured. Now, that is an email which is very long on assertion, and it's one with which we profoundly disagree. There was a response to it, apparently, I think on the 16th of March, which came by the programme officer, and it says that inspectors are of the view that if there is no prospect of a statement of common ground being achieved, it would be helpful to them if a list of the principal controversial issues between the parties could be prepared. It should include a short summary of the views of the parties involved. Such a document will assist inspectors in preparing an agenda for the resumed hearing into Matter 7, which we hope will take place in July. The inspectors are asking the councils to coordinate this work and expect all parties to assist in a timely fashion. We're not asking for any new technical work to be undertaken, and therefore hope this task will be completed and provided by the end of Tuesday, the 2nd of May. That a further 2 weeks pass before Mr. Miles, a further week passes before Mr. Miles emails all the parties, effectively setting out what it is the inspectors have decided, and asking for principal controversial issues. And that email is included, it actually comes from Caroline Hampton, Joanna Gilbert Wooldridge. We received last week the Matter statement. In response to the Matter statement, the issues statement and the agenda, we have produced a statement of common ground which we think focuses on issues which are raised by issues 1 and 2. So, Madam CG and no doubt others are perplexed and concerned that their participation in the exercise of agreeing the statement of common ground has been sidelined in this way by the council, writing to you this way. But leaving aside any issues of natural justice and so on, which I have to say is profoundly disturbing, we think it is important in this complex territory that we identify what issues are agreed. There are issues which are capable of being agreed. And we have sought in the Statement of Common Ground draft that we circulated last week in response to the agenda to identify issues which, all of which are effectively taken from the Council's own material. And I would therefore urge, first of all, that the Council reconsider their position in unhelpfully not responding to that. They say they haven't had time, well they've had actually 2.5 years to produce a draft statement of common ground. But I would urge them to reconsider their position. But in any event, that statement of common ground draft really represents our response to the issues that you've raised for today, and perhaps by saying it does no more than identify what I would be saying in closing the submissions today, because it encapsulates really all the points that we wish to make in relation to these issues. After 2.5 years, we all wish that you more than anyone else for this examination to come to a conclusion, and it is very important for future development in Cambridge that the plan does not fail or is not postponed yet again. But it is important also that due process is observed, and I entirely appreciate that the Council may not like our participation in this process, and that what we say they may not agree with. But all we're seeking to do is do our professional best in assisting you in coming to conclusions which we hope will lead to the finding of a sound plan in due course. I therefore urge that you do in fact accept this document that we've tried to put in to be helpful to the examination, because it is, as I say, not seeking to be in any way controversial or identify issues which are not evidence-based already.
Councillor, wish to respond?
Yes, so as far as I'm able, I think what you are being asked is to accept as an examination document a draft statement of common ground relating to transport matters that was produced on behalf of CEG and distributed by email shortly after lunchtime on Friday. As far as the Council is concerned, so it's a matter entirely for you as to whether you would be assisted by a document that carries that status, and we leave the matter entirely to you. So far, I'd say as to the wider points made on behalf of CEG and profound disagreement, as he puts it, as to the process. So I'm just going to just put a mark down on that. The Council, so far as the preparation for this hearing and engagement with other parties, as follows entirely the direction given by you and Ms. Graham in your communication to the Council on the 16th of March 2017. The first time that the Council heard anything of this was upon hearing to the limited submissions this morning, and this was expressed in the email sent by Mr. Bell on Friday, and indeed at any other time. And it may be so that you don't feel it's a matter that you need to spend a great deal of time on this session of the examination, but the Council do not accept one moment. This is an either substance or tone put by CEG before this morning as to its approach to this matter. But so to repeat the short point is, so if you would be assisted by a statement of common ground that is not agreed by the Council or any other party, so we'll be finding out for you to receive that document as an examination document, but it's supposed to be on one basis.
Okay, thanks for that. Yep, obviously we've people were not informed about that matter, and obviously we will take that matter into consideration. So can we now therefore move forward onto the main agenda, and we begin with issue 1, transport assessment. Sorry, I should have said, given that I think we're happy to receive Mr. Martin's document, could we arrange for that document to be circulated to the participants?
Sorry, I've got some copies here. Would you like to hand them out?
Please. And just to say that in terms of this, the statement of common ground that you've talked about, Mr. Village, given that there's no indication that it's been agreed by anybody else, we'll take it as being your submissions on behalf of CEG.
Thank you. I think actually it is fair to say that the Coalition of Parish Councils are going to agree it as well, but I think during the course of the day I would be very grateful if you would just having reading it, just identifying, perhaps during questioning, the extent to which any of the points within it are controversial. Because we don't believe they are. And that's why we assiduously tried to cross-reference it to the Council's own position. That's all I ask. Please, Dale has in mind that very, very
Okay, who wishes to lead off on issue 1? Step forward, Mr. Martin.
So I just wondered whether it would be helpful if I just said a few words about what my paper's about,
Yeah, I mean, it does.
as it's a new document for everybody concerned. In essence, it's very, very simple. The task in hand is to produce the most sustainable pattern of development. It's my view that there is a critical determinant required for that purpose. It follows that if the critical determinant has not been suitably factored in and taken account of, it could be said with some justification that you haven't then deduced the most sustainable pattern of development. It's my submission that there is such a critical determinant and that it has not been factored in correctly, and therefore the pattern of development is unfortunately not the most sustainable, I beg your pardon, the most evidently most sustainable, and that we therefore have an unfortunate consequence of a not sound plan.
Councillor, want to come back on stage?
What's that like? That's not a comment Councillor agree with, but I wonder whether so if maybe massive that will be picked up as we go through massive attention day or let's start some artists what's that stage.
Is there anything else, Mr. Martin, you want to say in terms of issue 1?
So far as the issue itself is concerned, the criterion is a critical determinant, mindful of the advice in the SDSR of the Council's Strategic Development Strategy Review, or forgive me if that's not correct. The SDSR, if I may, it's about the importance of transport accessibility. The SDSR is rightly concerned to set out the importance of accessibility across the various basic slots in the sequential order of development, starting with the city centre, the urban fringe, and so on. And its proposition is that we must reasonably maximise the accessibility. In my paper, I pointed out the distinction between close proximity and accessibility, and the SDR also eventually arrives at the acceptance of the term accessibility rather than proximity in the way I've described. The actual measure of transport accessibility has to be the actual available measure, not some fictitious measure, not some planned measure that somebody's dragged up, the actual available measure. There are many practical reasons for that, but in essence, the most fundamental reason is because planning itself is concerned to achieve practical outcomes. So to have a critical determinant that's based on the fairies or something is absolute nonsense. It has to be itself also based on the practical circumstances that apply. A shorthand term for the actual available measure of transport accessibility is sustainable transport capacity. The NPPF at paragraph 34 is concerned to achieve sustainable transport outcomes, and does so by imploring local authorities to make sure their plans and their development decisions achieve the most sustainable outcomes by minimising the need to travel, the distance to travel, and by maximising the ability to achieve modal shift away from the car. In order to maximise and minimise in that way, it's necessary for planning authorities to have regard to the sustainable transport capacity of such spatial options. You could not possibly do it by measuring some other criteria. It is fundamentally rooted in the sustainable transport capacity of those options. The paper also makes passing, makes passing reference to advice from Councillor Lewis Hurd about the importance of congestion management in around Cambridge. His basic proposition, if I can summarise it, would be that if we do not do congestion management, we will not be able to deliver the economic growth involved. Conversely, if we are, And so we need to consider at this point what congestion management is about, and it is, I would suggest, by design fundamentally concerned to change and sustainable transport capacity. So that raises the prospect, unfortunately, of this plan being prepared at a time when we haven't actually gotten around to doing what we've recognised and long recognised the need for, which is congestion management in around Cambridge. In other words, we haven't actually got around to changing and increasing sustainable transport capacity in the way required. So I've set out the proposition along the following lines. If we've got a sustainable spatial planning determinant, critical determinant, that needs to be taken in for plan development purposes, but if that is not being done, that's a bad situation for concern. And also, we haven't got around to doing it because we're actually in a situation where the transport side of things is actually out of sync with the land use side of things. That's both a matter of concern, but it's also a logical explanation for one of the outcomes of that situation, which is the transport modelling, which brings us to this morning's proceedings. Because the transport modelling is an attempt, the closest it gets, I would say, to actually trying to closely integrate the planned content of the transport. It's a closely integrated planning and transport process at its most basic. However, you would expect it to therefore be able to factor in sustainable transport capacity in order to test the spatial options it sets up to do so. In reality, it does nothing of the sort. It does nothing of the sort because it has to make assumptions. It has to make assumptions because it hasn't got the evidence base. It hasn't got the evidence base because it hasn't done the work. And that is entirely consistent with the situation I mentioned earlier about the congestion management situation around Cambridge. And I would further suggest that it hasn't done the work because it's actually got a mindset to actually produce and undertake and apply a transport mitigation planning process rather than a closely integrated planning process. And I've set out briefly in my paper what a transport mitigation process involves, but in essence it is basically we will decide by any criteria we choose other than the transport, what should go where, by what measure and so on. We will then, second stage, come along and try and mitigate the transport impact of those decisions. And that is the process that has been adopted around Cambridge for this plan review. And that is the corollary, if you like, in the situation I've just described for the transport modelling, and they're both, if you like, the fundamental product of the situation that started it. There isn't the evidence base in the way that I suggested. There are many adverse consequences, I could go on and describe it, but I'm sure that that's sufficient for the present.
Okay, thank you. Do you wish to come back?
Thank you. I'll just start and then hand over to Mr. Smith to say a little bit more about the transport context in which the plan's being prepared. But I think from the council's point of view, we very much would say that the plan has been supported by evidence of a well-considered transport strategy, looking at the available options and options that can be brought to bear to support growth of different development strategies. We have looked both at proximity but also accessibility, and we've looked at accessibility specifically by sustainable modes of transport, including shared by public transport, active modes, journey times and so on, and that is covered, we say, in the evidence that we have provided. But I think in terms of that wider consideration, it would be helpful if Mr. Smith just outlined just briefly the transport strategies that have, on which we have drawn and relied on, but perhaps also just a very brief outline of what is also happening ahead, because some of the issues that Mr. Martin referred to are being addressed in the wider context of Greater Cambridge City deal.
Thank you. So, yes, just to pick up on that, I think it's probably actually fair to say that if we look at the transport strategy work that's accompanied the work in preparing the local plans for Cambridge and South Cambridge, it was actually far, far more in sync than you would believe if you listened to Mr. Martin and made. The transport strategy for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire was actually developed entirely in parallel with the local plans and involved testing of options to support the development scenario with a focus on accessibility of the sites by sustainable modes. And I would not disagree at all with actually the assessment of what is critical in terms of the capacity of the network. However, I would say that I believe that the councils have taken the necessary, or made the necessary assumptions, in regard of the sustainable transport capacity is needed. The capacity, Mr. Martin referred to this in his note, the capacity of the network is assessed in detail in the transport modelling work, and it is that work that then brings out the requirements for capacity for the sustainable networks that then can be provided to support the development. And that work happened in the development of the plans up to 2014 and indeed has continued since as further modelling work has been undertaken to support the evidence base for the plans. So I think there's probably not too much more to say. I think we would say that actually a lot of the points that have been brought up here have actually been dealt with in the evidence base that the councils have produced on transport.
Do you correct this morning?
Thank you, sir.
I think if I just heard you correctly, you'd say that the transport modelling has actually correctly tested options by making assumptions about transport capacity. If that's correct, that's exactly the case I'm seeking to draw attention to. Because in making assumptions about transport capacity, which is in CSR 15 at the back, I think Appendix B, sir, the assumptions are very interesting. One of them is the assumption that every option is it's possible for every option to be to have the benefit of high quality public transport. Now, the whole point of NPPF paragraph 34, for example, is for planning authorities to test different locations for development because sustainable transport outcomes vary with location. To therefore run transport modelling as if each location is able to benefit from the same high standard of transport accessibility is only an assumption that holds good if it's demonstrated that the modelling is able to achieve that same standard, the same consistently high standard of transport accessibility for each option. But it's my submission that that's simply not possible. The whole point of NPPF is the proof of that, because NPPF paragraph 34 recognises rightly that transport accessibility varies with locations. And for the outcome is that we've therefore got transport modelling which actually is being run on an assumption that, in the way I just described, the net effect is that the whole plan review process is run on that same assumption. In other words, that it's nullifying a very critical determinant which the SDR itself recognises. Now, I don't believe that that's a very sensible situation for this plan review to be based
on. As part of the modelling work, transport capacity for sustainable modes has been tested for all of the development options that were considered. And indeed, looking forward through the Greater Cambridge City deal, there is significant work on the projects that will provide that capacity, looking at Bourne Airfield, looking at Waterbeach Barracks, and looking at other sites. This is work in progress. Yes, the schemes are being developed, but that capacity can be provided. It is grounded in the local plan policy. It is grounded in transport policy for the city and county. This is happening. The fact that the capacity is not there at this moment in time, well, a lot of the settlements that this capacity will be supporting aren't there at this moment in time. The fact they're being planned for together is actually a positive position.
So, if I may, the paper I've written does not rely upon the notion that there must be existing capacity available at this time. It is the actual available scope for that capacity which the SDSR, for example, seeks to take proper account of. I acknowledge that some work has been done to test various spatial options as they are proposed as part of the transport mitigation process. I wouldn't expect otherwise, for example, the A10 corridor and the A428 corridor. But the transport mitigation process and the SDR and the NPPF are all about finding the most sustainable, and that requires you to test side by side various options. And the critical determinant to which I refer requires you to test those options by factoring in sustainable transport capacity. With great respect, I don't believe that is what is being done.
We may need to disagree on that point.
So, if I may come back on that, if that has been done, could the Council therefore justify why the particular sustainable transport capacity data for each spatial option was not factored in to the modelling that they rely upon? Why instead it's been necessary to undertake that modelling with assumptions? Could they also at the same time clearly demonstrate what the sustainable transport capacity change is going to reasonably be, mindful of the expectation they include in the modelling about congestion management? Congestion management isn't ignored in the modelling, there's specific mention of it. So the relevance of congestion management is acknowledged. But what they, I would suggest, cannot do is to yet deduce the sustainable the change and increase in sustainable transport capacity as a result of that congestion management. It may well be that they believe, in their view, that the control points system of congestion management is right. But with hindsight, since CSR M15 has been produced, there's been a lot of disquiet locally about control points, and they believe that it's not yet proven as being the adopted process. More to the point, perhaps, it's not yet been proven to be the evidently best adopted process. So all of that ground to do with congestion management is yet to be covered. And therefore all of the ground to actually explain why it is right and reasonable to adopt consistently high assumptions about public transport capacity, for example, is something that just doesn't hold water. There isn't a justification for that assumption, but it's my proposition is that it's the force of circumstances that nevertheless require it. The force of circumstances ultimately drive the fact that they haven't done the work. And I don't think I've heard anything this morning to suggest they have done the work.
Thank you. Respond.
The work has been done. If we're looking at evidence, models tend to be based on the evidence of how the transport network performs at the moment in the base case. Validated through exhaustive, and I think participants around the table will probably reflect on this with the amount of work that has been done to demonstrate that the model is accurately predicting the base case situation and indeed future year situations, but exhaustive work to justify the model actually replicating the transport network accurately in the base case. And then when further interventions, whether they be housing or transport interventions, are coded in the model, the reactions of the model to those locations of development coded and indeed the transport infrastructure coded are based on evidence from previous schemes and how they have performed with in similar circumstances. For example, to give a local example, the busway between St Ives and Northern Cambridge, which has achieved high levels of patronage. The model is not just a black box. You have to make assumptions when you are modelling. This goes with the territory. But those assumptions are informed by evidence.
So, if I may, once again, I understand how the modelling works in the fundamentals you describe, but there is no justification, it seems to me, for the adoption of the particular assumptions, other than the passages that I may. Unfortunately, the extract of the modelling CSR 15 doesn't have a passage, but there's a small passage in Appendix B to say how the assumptions have been made, and it's based on the estimation of the public transport and other transport infrastructure requirements of each option. But the point is that they are in itself, therefore, estimations, they are assumptions. And we keep coming back to the point that in order to actually test with test options in the way required by the realities of things, the actual available outcomes of the sequential order after the STSR, in paragraph 34 of the NPPF, it's pointless to say that I can assume this and therefore the assumption will be whatever that follows. Because essentially saying that if I can assume that, which is what the modelling does, that transport capacity can provide it as and when required, any assumptions that any modelling then done on that basis will inevitably provide a pattern of development which is devoid of any indication of the actual available measure of sustainable transport capacity. If that is a situation that is acceptable to this inquiry, I stand down. But if, however, it's a matter that is a critical determinant pursuant to the STSR and paragraph 34 of the NPPF, it doesn't hold square. And you cannot have a position where you can occupy both positions. They just don't square.
Okay,
So can I just perhaps seeking perhaps the different positions? I mean, Mr. Smith has explained that the modelling is not a black box, it is an exercise that does require elements of judgment in terms of inputs. And that, I suggest, is hardly surprising insofar as a model which is forward-looking in terms of looking at the implications of development and the effect of certain transport infrastructure within the network in the future. So it is inevitable that judgments have to be exercised and assumptions have to be made. Now, there may be a point about the robustness and reliability of any assumptions, that's rather a different point. But even insofar as it's being suggested that there is something objectionable about a modelling exercise which is forward-looking, proceeding on the basis of certain inputs as formulated on assumptions, then that assumption is not a legitimate objection. As far as the particular assumptions that Mr. Martin has sought to highlight in his written normal submissions, Mr. Smith has sought to address those as to what basis those assumptions were drawn from past evidence, if there are any further challenges that are made to the assumptions through the modelling process, and Mr. Smith consists with those as well.
okay, sorry, happy to leave that or?
I wasn't quite clear what you said towards the tail end of that. I'm not asking you to repeat it, but I think the gist of what you were saying, I think I understood. The issue then is about the validity and the sound application of the critical determinant which I've mentioned. In summary, I would say that there are two issues of concern to try and resolve this issue. First of all, has there been a ranking of the potential or more reasonable transport corridors around Cambridge, mindful of NPPF 34? If there was sustainable transport capacity available, we would know which would maximise modal shift and which would minimise the distance to travel. And it seems to me so that would be an extremely useful understanding to have in your task of understanding whether the proposed pattern development is sound or not. The ranking would be required because you have to look at all reasonable options and you have to understand which were potentially towards the top and the most sustainable. Now, I've never seen any work of anything remotely of that kind. The reason is because I'd like to come to my second and last point, which is that the process is steadily usurped, as it were, by the transport mitigation process, which is to say that development corridors A and B will be had instead of C, D, E, F, G, and F. And A and B will then be tested by a mitigation process to see whether their mitigation transport impacts can be mitigated. That point will be that the corridors A and B would be found to be the most sustainable if they were tested in the way I would suggest. But there isn't the evidence to show that A and B are the most sustainable. And that is the critical point. There isn't the evidence that's required. Now, if there had been none, you would then be able to show that A and B would best comply with paragraph 34. But in the absence of evidence about corridors tested in this way, it seems to me that they're obliged to fall back on the transport mitigation process, and then obliged to say to this inquiry, this examination, one plan is sound because we decided that A and B is where we would like development. As far as it goes, that's fine. And then we demonstrate that we can mitigate the transport impacts. But that is a proposition, that's a standard of evidence, that's an outcome which is wholly different, and I would suggest a lesser standard than that required by SDSR, which is deliberately their own document trying to find the most sustainable, the evidently most sustainable, and the NPPF. And it really does turn, I think, on whether you actually accept the proposition that they've got an entitlement to come to decisions A and B and then try and justify them how they wish, or whether you see that there is a complex need in this difficult and changing world to actually come to terms with very high levels of congestion management, to recognise that the local growth agenda is extreme in every sense in terms of its scale, to therefore recognise, as Councillor Lewis Herbert did, that actually we've got to get congestion management introduced, which is not happening down the road in somewhere town, it's happening here. And that's an indication of how significant this place is. And it has to be done, he said, before we can expect to deliver that which requires to be delivered. Now, all of those things hang together if you come to this with a transport first mentality. If you come together, if you come to this plan of view with something other than the notion of consultation between a transport strategy, which is with great respect, nothing more than a bundle of woolly objectives, a transport strategy, and the two local plans. But that, in essence, is what will happen. If you go back to Issues Options 2012, you will find a consultation process that was basically that it was held out to be a consultation process of two local plan issues and options. At the same time, there was a consultation process about the strategy, and it was held that that was somehow a meaningful way of conducting what they call a joined-up planning process. With great respect, I don't think that's the case. It wasn't then, it wasn't now. And if I may so finish with one point, that the issue in many respects comes down to the ability to run buses on time in and around Cambridge. That ability turns on the integration of transport and planning process. It requires on the evidence for sustainable transport capacity. It requires on the stick and carrot mentality of congestion management. It requires new public transport capacity, the carrot in all of this, to parallel and support the stick. And that is a very big acid test. Now the reason I say that is because this plan review is being based on the proposition of trust us. This plan review is basically saying trust us to deliver buses on the streets of Cambridge. Well, I say to this in plan inquiry, after about 15, 17 years, it's time we actually moved on from a position of trust us in and around Cambridge. And I say that because when the examination in public was had for the Cambridge Structure Plan in around 2002, the panel inspector asked that very question to a senior planning officer of one of the two district councils. So why is it that you are so sure you can ensure that buses will run on the streets of Cambridge as and when required, in brackets, in support of your proposed plan content, close brackets? And the answer he got back was, trust us. And that's 15, 17 years ago, and after all of what's gone on since then, we are still no further forwards. And that, with great respect, is not sufficient and adequate for a sound plan.
Thank you. The councils do say very clearly that we believe we have followed a sound process in preparing our plans. We have looked at reasonable alternatives for the development strategy that look at available options at the different stages in the sustainable development sequence that Mr. Martin referred to. We've looked at real available options available to us at those different stages of the sequence. We've tested those strategies through the transport modelling, and we believe, a good understanding of the both the transport benefits of those different stages in the sequence, the issues that may arise from them, the mitigation that is needed to deliver them, whether that mitigation is deliverable, and we have looked at that alongside a range of other material planning considerations in looking at the appropriate development strategy overall in the plans. So in the same way that when we were sitting here about a year ago talking about the Greenbelt methodology and the fact that is one of a suite of evidence that's informed our preferred strategy, the transport modelling is similarly one of a suite of evidence documents that together we have taken into account as articulated in our development strategy update document RD MC 060, particularly at paragraphs starting on page 33 where we look at the edge of Cambridge versus the new settlements, and then on page 30, from page 39 where we look at how we came about identifying the preferred development strategy.
Which document is that?
That's the development strategy update document from November 2015, which is RD/MC/060. And that's the culmination of the work that the council did when, in response to the inspector's letter, when we brought together a suite of evidence that we had undertaken to help us retest the development strategy, and included the additional transport modelling work that we undertook. But coming back specifically to Mr. Marsden's point, we do believe that it is appropriate that we have tested the development strategies as we have, based on the site options available, that we have looked at the Highways Authority's professional judgment of appropriate mitigations to deliver, likely to be necessary to deliver those sites, which has then been tested through further modelling and has informed and been very much taken into account in reaching our decisions.
Thank you.
So can I just add just very briefly to that? So far as the approach to infrastructure, particularly transport infrastructure, is concerned, the Council's approach most certainly has not been one of trust either. The Council set out in its evidence space what infrastructure it considered is necessary to deliver the drug development strategy, and importantly, that evidence space has been thoroughly scrutinised at earlier stages of this examination. The matter is addressed in RDMC 060, the document Mrs. Hunt referred to a moment ago, where the approach to transport infrastructure and its delivery has been addressed. And I refer you in particular to pages 36 through to and including page 38. And in the context of the proposed new settlements, the approach to the required infrastructure and the reliability as to its delivery was examined in the context of paragraph 177 of the NPPF, in the context both of Waterbeach and the Bourne Airfield. And so can I refer you to the Council examination statement for matter SC6 and its response to, in terms of Waterbeach, question 1, Roman 5, and in respect of Bourne Airfield, question 1, Roman 6.
Okay, to move on, do you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, sir. I think it would be helpful, sir, if you have to hand, in order to follow the points made, is RDX 130, which is the note for the inspectors on the principal issues relating to transport modelling.
Sorry, which document?
This is the principal issues on transport modelling. You know, sir, RDX 130. And also the latest transport modelling report, which is RDMC 017. Is that right? Coming back to your first issue on the agenda, so the principal issues note set out 5 principal issues that we have identified in relation to the transport modelling. We consider principal issues 1, 4 and 5 are relevant to issue 1 on your agenda. But before I take you through those principal issues notes, I would like to take you to page 61 of RDMC 070. I think it's very, very important for all parties around this table not to lose sight of the importance of transport issues in this local plan process. As Mr. Martin has pointed out, transport is a critical determinant in the preparation of the local plan. Now, to put into context how important transport is, we are aware that the Council have produced a large suite of evidence using a well-established transport model. But if you go to figure 6.4 on page 61, now this is the preferred strategy, the outcome of the transport modelling for the preferred strategy. So what we have in figure 6.4 is the forecast change in total delay between 2011, which is the baseline run of the model, up to 2031, the end of the local plan period. Now the preferred strategy is referenced on the basis of the preferred development strategy. So if we take the figure on the left-hand side of figure 6.4, what we have there is the forecast increase in total delay on the network between 2011 and 2031, with and without the transport intervention strategy. So as you can see, the total delay on the network is separated out between Cambridge City, South Cambridgeshire and Cambridgeshire as a whole. So what that table is saying, sir, is between 2011 and 2031, without any transport intervention strategy, if the local plan development is to go ahead, delays are forecast to increase by 112% in the City of Cambridge and 107% in South Cambridgeshire. To put that into context, that is doubling the existing delays on the network already considered to be severe. Now, I reiterate the point of doubling because the transport intervention strategy must take into account a significant weight to alternatives to travelling by car on the highway network. Because if you're left with a transport network where delays are double in the future, and you don't have a reasonable alternative, be it by public transport or by walking and cycling, that adds significant weight to the issue of transport in the local plan process. So the first column is the do minimum. The second column is to do something. Now the do something is what the Council's model predicts will happen with the transport intervention strategy costing circa £750 million. And what that shows is, even with all this transport infrastructure, in the City of Cambridge, delays are still forecast to more than double, i.e. 102%, between 2011 and 2031. So this well-established model is saying we can deliver all this transport infrastructure, but we're still going to have double the delays on the network. Now that is a very important point, coming back to the critical determinant point Mr. Martin makes, because people have to have reasonable alternatives, be it by a public transport system that's delivered on time, that bypasses all this delay, or people have the opportunity to walk and cycle and do that experience and can get to work from, quite frankly. So it's important to understand that context of why we're here today and why transport is an important matter. So coming back to the principal issues that we've identified, if I can take you to... Oh, sorry, sir, just going back to figure 6.4. Those figures I quoted were for the morning peak. In the evening peak, which is the figure to the right-hand side of the MP, the delays are at 162% and 171%, even with the transport strategy. So it's actually going up. So it suggests on a very basic level the transport strategy is not effective. And that is the Council's own evidence. That is, as Mr Smith points out, a well-established model. And we're not here disputing the use of that model. It's how the councils have interpreted the results of that model.